Welcome to Strategic versus Operational Thinking. It's always a strange title because it sort of feels like they're in competition with each other. And I suppose they are to some extent, but I'm going to break all of this down for you. My name's Hayley Gillard. I'm a business psychology consultant and the founder of Compassionate Leaders. And myself, along with Gemma Brown, provide the training and the online webinars and things like that for the Women in Social Housing Network, which I believe probably 90% of you have found me through there. As I've said, we're going to run for an hour and I'm just going to go for it. Okay, so all of the photos you see here today are of women in social housing. They're all people that I've either delivered workshops or leadership training for, and I deliberately choose photos that are of real people in real management and leadership positions because I think it's a way of hopefully us all sort of connecting to that. So, aims of the session, we are going to look at the topic. So I think that's probably obvious, but what is strategic thinking? What is operational thinking? When do you use each type of thinking? What are the pros and cons of each of them? Just what is it? What is it as a topic? We will also look at understanding yourself. So I'm going to apply the topic, not just, I don't want to just talk about it conceptually. I don't just want to teach you something. As I said, I'm a facilitator, I'm a coach, I run workshops, I'm a psychologist. I love the sort of toing and froing of communication. So I want to ask you some questions around self-awareness. So are you somebody who prefers to think more strategically or more operationally? Actually, how is that relevant to your job or your career progression? Maybe you have a certain job that you're aiming for, or perhaps you've been told that, you know, in your current role that you need to start thinking more strategically, for example, or less strategically, in my case. And then we're also going to look at your team. So it wouldn't be a Hayley webinar without looking at team dynamics and communication and rapport and how you can become a better leader, a better manager. And so we will look at how understanding whether you yourself and your team members think operationally or strategically can help you to be a better manager and avoid conflict and miscommunication. Hopefully that sounds all right. Okay, a little bit about me. So I'm, as I said, a business psychology consultant. My academic background blends psychology and business, and I'm particularly interested in team dynamics. So the way that a team and the team culture can influence an individual's behaviour and ways of working and emotions. And I'm also very interested in it the other way around. So how an individual can have an impact on a team culture and a team dynamic. So that's what my kind of academic interest is in. And then I'm the founder of Compassionate Leaders. So what we do as a company is it's essentially leadership development, but it kind of looks like different things. So if you sort of imagine that the overarching thing is leadership development, that might be delivering leadership development programs, for which there is one that Wish is going to deliver at the end of the year that I'm running. And I obviously do that in-house as well, but it's all the way through to how do we as a leadership team, how do we as a management team, how do we as managers empower ourselves to be the best we can be, but also empower our team. So I'm really interested in kind of high performance and the skills and attributes needed to become a high-performing leadership team. And then we've got a team of facilitators and coaches that support workshops and go and do one-to-one and group coaching as well, where that is necessary. And I've put on that final bullet point: dance mat enthusiast, beauty therapist, and bushcraft teacher, by means of a potted history into my professional background. So this is on there because I'm really passionate about building rapport in a team, building understanding of each other. Actually, that builds trust, and if teams trust each other, you've got the basis there for high performance. And so one of the best ways that you can learn to trust each other and learn to build rapport is by sharing a little bit about who you are outside of work. So this is related to work. So my first ever job was working for The Entertainer, the toy shop, and I used to stand at the front of the shop demonstrating the latest toys as an adult. Well, I was 16, and particularly found an enthusiasm for dance mats. So if nobody has ever used a dance mat before, I do recommend it. I was working there while I was training as a beauty therapist. So I did that when I was 16 to 18. And I actually got a little bit bored. So I loved the people, I loved the conversation, but I got a little bit bored doing the same thing over and over. And the link between this and operational versus strategic thinking you'll kind of get in a second. But beauty therapy is very operational. It's very much about, what customer have you got in, what is the treatment you're doing. You have quite a transactional, generally, relationship with that person. It didn't suit my way of thinking and my natural strategic abilities, I suppose. And then I also am a qualified bushcraft teacher, just a total opposite end of the spectrum. And again, I'm sharing this just to build rapport and to try and role model, I suppose, how you can do this amongst your team. The way I kind of transitioned into doing what I'm doing now is that I used to do bushcraft, so outdoor, fire lighting, den building, using tools and stuff outside with teams, and actually found that the conversations around the campfire whilst you're cooking your lunch were actually the most productive conversations that those people had had in a long time. And it wasn't just because they were out of the office doing something new. It was it obviously a big part of team dynamics is taking time out, but it was about actually giving time and space to some really tough conversations that actually, if you come out of your four walls and out of the internal politics, you can get a little bit more perspective on that. And that was something that then became the founding of Compassionate Leaders and my psychology training. And then I've also put on the bottom, I'm also human. So again, just to build a little bit of rapport here. And I just want to acknowledge that we do spend a lot of time at work. I think there is a stat, isn't there, around how long we spend at work. But if you ignore, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're more than just job titles. We're more than just job descriptions. And it's really important to acknowledge that about yourself and understand where your boundaries are in terms of how much you share and what you're happy with, but equally how much you know your team and how much trust and rapport is there as a result of that. So why do I care about compassionate leadership? Well, just quickly tell you a story. So my first job within social housing, so after I'd been on the dance mat and been a beauty therapist, I worked for an amazing guy in a housing association in the Midlands, and he was brilliant, and he created an environment where people absolutely loved coming to work. I loved it. He empowered me, he supported me, he did the kind of practical things like put me on training courses and develop me in that way, but I guess what he really did was give me pieces of work to do that suited the way I thought. He understood what my interests were. He flexed the job description to empower me as an individual. And so he built a great organizational culture. He built a great team, and we worked hard and we played hard as well. I remember socializing outside of work. He would do things like on a hot day go and buy ice creams for everyone in the office. And I know they sound like little things, but actually these are the things that really make a difference. And it was brilliant, and I absolutely loved working there. And then one day he announced his retirement, and it was expected. It hadn't come out of the blue. And his kind of not predecessor, what's the word? The next guy that was going to take over came in, and quite literally things changed overnight. It became an environment where I didn't want to go to work. I was micromanaged within an inch of my life. There were lots of conversations around mandatory training and go and do this, go and do that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do mandatory training, but it was less about the person and the individual and more about the processes and what had to be done and following the rules. And I just stopped flourishing, and I stopped kind of signing up for things. I stopped kind of, raising my hand and getting involved. And I really remember one memory. And as I say this out loud, it won't sound very dramatic, but I'm trying to get you in my mindset. So I'd gone from an organization with a culture that was really empowering and friendly and supportive to working for a new boss who created a culture of you had to follow the rules. There was a bit of peer pressure. People became competitive. Everybody felt like they had a point to prove with this new guy because they were scared of losing their jobs. And I remember one occasion going up to his office to ask him a question. And we used to have a policy, open door policy. If your door was open, you could you could just come in and answer it. And equally respected that if somebody needed to get their head down and get on with a piece of work, or they were having a confidential conversation, the door would be closed, and that was fine. So anyway, I went up to his office. The door was open, so assumed it was fine. And I kind of walked in as though I was going to enter the room, and noticed that actually he was having a conversation with someone. So there was somebody else sitting opposite him, opposite his desk. And so I sort of backed out, as if to say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you were having a conversation." In my head, thinking, "I'll come back in a bit. It's not important." But as I did that, he put his hand up like this, and it felt like I was 2 inches from his face. I wasn't, but that's how it felt. And he just said, "Not now." And it made me feel that big. And I know you might sort of say, "Well, what the hell's your problem? Get over it. People are busy." But actually, I think it was such a stark contrast to the leadership that I'd had previously. It just made me completely disengage. And I'm trying to here show you two examples of high performance and excellent leadership, and actually really poor leadership. It's needless to say that massive staff turnover, etc., ensued. I left within about a month of that. But I care about compassionate leadership because what I've been able to do in the jobs I've had since, and obviously in running my own business since, is look back at those two occasions and work out what is it that was different. Why is it that one was really empowering and the other wasn't? And it was that. So compassionate leadership, I define it as having to make really hard business decisions, but delivering it with empathy and care. Absolutely caring about the impact of your words, the way you come across, your body language, your interaction style, the team environment, the people that you've got in your team, etc. You still have to make hard business decisions, of course you do, but you do that with empathy. That is compassionate leadership in a nutshell. And actually, as I think about that story, one of the things that first chief exec did, that the really good one, was understood the way that I think. He understood that I'm naturally a strategic thinker. And I just wanted to start there as the sort of jumping off point, to bring it to life a little bit, because what the other guy did, and I'm not saying that the way he thought in terms of operationally was wrong, but what it didn't do is leave any room for creativity or innovation. He was very process oriented. You had to follow the rules and you had to do one thing after the other without any room for individual differences. And that's massive. So let's actually just kick off. I'm just sorry, I need to move my screen down there. So okay. So why does understanding the difference between strategic and operational thinking actually matter? So in terms of for yourself, let's start there, your own career progression. And what I mean by that is the higher up you go in an organization, typically you have to think more strategically. So generally, people who are at the higher end of the pay grades, at the higher end of the kind of hierarchy, have to look outwardly. They have to look into the future, and they have to position the business in the market in a certain place. We'll talk about what strategic thinking is in a second. But for your own career progression, if you want to move up, not necessarily into middle management, and possibly departmental management is probably a bit of a in between the two, operational and strategic. But definitely, if you want to sit in that strategic leadership team, if you want a board position, if you're aiming for sort of chief exec, deputy chief exec, that level, absolutely you need to understand the difference. For higher job satisfaction, and what I mean by that is you can pick and choose roles that play to your strength. So if you know I'm naturally more of a strategic thinker, like I did back in that job, actually I can position myself into what was great. I suppose what was great is I worked directly with the CEO, and I understood. I was his executive assistant. That's how I started. I ended up as business innovation manager, but I started as his exec assistant, and I loved the being able to see outwards and being able to see almost like a chessboard, being able to move the pieces of the organization and have that bird's eye view of what needed to be done. So I got a better job satisfaction when I was privy to some of that information. That job satisfaction went down when I was made to sort of follow the processes and follow the rules. Oops. Again, enhanced leadership effectiveness. So it matters that you understand the difference, because you can position your people based on their natural strengths, or because you can empower people to learn more, and lean into different ways of thinking, obviously I have to think operationally as well as strategically. I think it's absolutely the reason I run my own business, because I'm head in the sky strategic thinker, but obviously there are day-to-day operations that have to happen within a business. So I have to be able to do both. But what I do is bring people in and delegate those things. That makes me a better leader than if I was trying to do it all, or if I was outsourcing and delegating the things that actually probably should stay with me. Better self-awareness, I think, goes without saying. The absolute core of effective leadership is brilliant self-awareness. All leaders are people who regularly review. Oh no, let me rephrase that. All good leaders are people who regularly review, regularly learn, regularly externalize problems, speak to others about what's going on, gain kind of market understanding, don't stagnate because they're learning and they're growing all the time. And obviously you need self-awareness in order to do that. And I think this one I've probably already covered in other ways, but actually improved communication and better conflict resolution, because you understand people and you understand yourself, and you can therefore understand why things might be frustrated. Perhaps I don't know, perhaps you've asked a member of staff to do something and they just aren't doing it. I could probably give you numerous examples of where someone has said to me, can you I don't know, go and book a venue for an event and arrange the logistics, and it'll be on the bottom of my to-do list, and I'll keep it on the bottom of my to-do list. That could become really, really frustrating for my manager. And if they're worried about conflict, or don't want to delegate, or don't want to be confrontational with me, that would be left to fester, and I would potentially get a reputation for somebody that was work shy or didn't want to do it. Actually, I'm just rubbish at logistics. So can you see how kind of this would help you understand your team and therefore avoid some of those things? So that's for yourself. And then in terms of for the team and the organization, it matters because you will reduce errors and accidents. So by having an understanding of the people who are very process oriented versus big picture thinking, you will reduce errors and accidents. I used to work for a mental health charity, and we went out and delivered lots of mental health awareness training across the whole of Yorkshire. And I was somebody who would be able to do that. Okay, so we want to create a training course. The aim of the training course is to do this. Here's what the main modules are going to be. By the end of it, we would like the outcomes to be XYZ for participants. And then I would have to work with my colleague to go, okay, what are the activities? How long is that going to take? How does that fit into this bit? Because I could have done that, but it wasn't playing to my strengths. So that's like kind of an example of efficiency, I suppose. Positive organizational culture goes without saying. If you are playing to people's strengths and giving people work that they naturally are good at, you will optimize your organizational culture. That will impact your customer satisfaction, of course. So anything that you can do to make your team better, you will have a broader impact and a better impact on any stakeholders, not just customers. People will be happier. People will be more engaged. If you go back to my example about the first CEO I had that was brilliant at supporting their staff, we were completely engaged. I said we worked hard and we played hard, and it felt like the commitment was absolutely there. I didn't need to be asked to do overtime. I just did it because I really cared. The first guy, I couldn't wait to leave at 5 o'clock. Couldn't care less. Didn't want to give him anything, you know. And then enhanced innovation and creativity. So if there is space for stepping out of the day-to-day, if there is space for stepping off the production line, coming out of the problem solving and the tasks, actually you get to think big picture, and you get to think about ideas, and you get to think about what are your competitors doing. And obviously that then can have a huge impact on how you go about your day-to-day. And then increased trust. I've already mentioned at the beginning how important this is. Trust is the foundation for all successful teams. And again, if you are understanding yourself and you're understanding your colleagues, you will increase your trust and therefore the performance of your team. Okay, let's start with what is strategic thinking. And I'm just going to grab my phone because I want to highlight this. I'm just going to open the notes. I want to highlight what I mean by this through the lens of marriage. And I think the reason I'm starting with a marriage is because I think it might be more relatable than a work setting. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my husband and our dynamics. Think about planning my wedding, and I'm going to really deliberately highlight here, using a bit of caricaturization, the difference between operational and strategic thinking. So when it came to my wedding, I thought I'd really like something rustic. I want there to be a free bar. I want there to be dancing, but people to not feel awkward. I don't want there like to be a dead dance floor. I know that I have heritage that meant I wanted a Hayley band, and I wanted the food to be really non-fussy. I didn't really want waitress service, and we wanted to do it as cheaply as possible, and I wanted it to be in the summer. That was it. Can someone go and plan my wedding for me then, please? And so my husband and my mum and my mother-in-law and my sister made my wedding happen. Okay, I know that there will be eye rolls and people going, "What the hell?" But bear with me. I'm going to keep reiterating it. Okay, let me give you another example between me and my husband. Food. What I mean by that is, if I go food shopping, I will walk around a supermarket and go, "That's nice, that's nice. I'll have that. Oh, I fancy that. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're on a health kick at the moment. I'll have all of these things. Oh, yeah, I fancy that. What are we celebrating this weekend? Great, let's have some of that." And I'll go home and I'll unpack, and we'll have loads of food in the house, and I'll love it. And I'll be very excited every time I look in my fridge to go, what do I fancy? My husband, on the other hand, will look in the fridge and go, "Why have we got so much food? None of this stuff goes together. What is this?" He is someone that meal plans, writes a shopping list, and then orders it online. I can't think of anything worse than knowing what food I'm going to have tomorrow night, and the next night, and the next night, and not being able to go in the fridge and just eat what, sorry, there's a fly flying around here, not being able to go in the fridge and just eat whatever I want at risk of needing it for 3 nights' time dinner. That's an example of me being very strategic and him being very operational. Let's give you one more. We live in a house renovation project. Project's the right word. I saw a house, I saw potential, I saw what it could look like in the future, and I saw this colour there, that furniture there. It was all in my head. It was very visual. I loved it. I'm not very good at DIY. So if my husband and my dad could maybe make that happen for me, that'd be great. Okay, so I've got two questions. How infuriating is that? Dot, dot, dot. And then the second question is, well, why does our marriage work? So, and again, I'm using marriage as a kind of light-hearted way of just explaining this. So it's absolutely infuriating for the other person. I am infuriated that I can't eat what I want whenever I want. And I'm infuriated that my husband can't look around the house and see amazing potential and the future and how our family would look in this great house. He finds me absolutely infuriating because I don't think through the detail of the amount of effort that goes into renovating my kitchen. I really remember my mum being like, "But what kind of wedding dress do you want?" I was like, "It doesn't really matter, just make me one." And obviously that was completely infuriating. You can see how really easy it is for us to have crazy arguments, and absolutely we have. Fortunately, we went through a rocky patch about 5 years ago and had some incredible marriage counselling. And this comes down to that self-awareness piece. What it enabled us to do and why our marriage works is we understand each other. We understand that Ross needs detail. He needs logistics. He needs planning. I really don't need that. I need the opposite. In fact, it stifles my creativity and my playfulness and my innovation, excuse me, if I'm forced to think like that. To the point where if someone says, I don't know, like let's say we're going to host Easter and we're going to have Easter at my house, we're going to do an Easter egg hunt, we're going to do roast dinner and whatever. I will go so far as saying, "Okay, I'll get the Easter eggs, we're going to do an Easter egg hunt and I'll sort it out on the day." My husband will know what time everyone's coming, what the dietary requirements are. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. So that is, you might have a preference. So as you're hearing me talk, you might go, "God, your husband's right. Obviously he's right." And equally, you might be thinking, "Oh yeah, no, Hayley, I'm with you. I would hate that. I'd hate that level of detail." So I want to say you might have a preference for one or the other. So become self-aware as to whether you're passing judgment on me or my husband, and that's okay. I'm deliberately using this as an example. But neither of us is wrong or right. And actually, that's what makes us a great partnership. We play to each other's strengths. So we now say, okay, we're going to go on holiday in May half term. I'm going to choose where we go. And I'm going to say, I need some space within that week to just wander around and decide what I fancy doing. He needs to book the flights and make sure we're on time to the airport, to the point where I don't even know what, I literally couldn't even tell you. We're going in about 10 days. I couldn't tell you what time my flight is. It could be 5 a.m. It could be 5 p.m. I've no clue. I think it's Sunday. Not sure. Because it just doesn't enter my brain. It's not because it's not important, and it's not because I don't value it. I just don't naturally do it. So hopefully you can get a bit of understanding with how infuriating it can be when somebody thinks in the opposite way, but equally what you have to do to solve some of that. So you absolutely have to communicate. You have to understand your preferences, and you have to understand the other person's, and be open-minded that there isn't one that's better than the other. Okay, I'm just going to quickly open the chat box to make sure that that's not any questions. Can you be a bit of both? Absolutely. Big picture thinking. Right, hang on, let me just read this. Oh, Jade, I hope you've managed to fix that. We will send a replay round if you haven't managed to fix it. Yes, so I have a diagnosis of one of ADHD. Absolutely my superpower. People play to my strengths. I, as a business owner, can come into your team and easily see what the issues are. I can understand where the dynamics issues are, what the problems. I just couldn't see it because I just think like that. Whereas when you're in it, it can be really difficult to do that. So it's completely my superpower. And yes, you can be a little bit of both. I think it depends on the situation, and I think it depends on. So as a psychologist, I'm not. I actually really avoid putting people in boxes. So I'm very anti personality testing. I'm very anti saying I'm left, right brain thinking, left or right brain thinking. I'm a big picture person. I'm a little picture person. It's about preferences, and it's about a sliding scale, and you can move up and down that scale depending on certain situations. I happen, like from a self-awareness perspective, I know that I am very up here. However, when it comes to running my business, I care so much about the operations because it's my brand. It's really important to me. I just don't want to do it. So I want the feedback. I want somebody to tell me that it's all working or that it isn't, but I don't want to do the doing. It doesn't play to my strengths. Only person in my team, so I have to be both strategic and operational, and a single parent, so I have to juggle it all. I hear you. It is hard. I can't relate from a parenting perspective, but absolutely in terms of running a business. I spent 6 years without outsourcing anything and had to do it all, and it is hard. Can you change over time? I don't know, is the short answer to that. Yeah, I can't see why not. People change over time. I think things can come in and influence the way you view the world and your sort of core beliefs. And so, yes, I suppose, why not? I think it's just becoming self-aware with if that's happening to you and what that might mean in terms of the way you work and the way you interact with people, I suppose. So let's apply it to a work context. I'm aware I speak 100 miles an hour. You might have to watch this on the replay and slow me down. Okay, so what is strategic thinking? I've put a picture of a helicopter here deliberately, because if you imagine strategic thinking being about helicoptering up out of the day-to-day. So you have a bird's eye view. You can see from this image, you can see all around, you can see the landscape of the way your organisation is operating or your team is operating within your organisation. You can see into the future. You can see behind you in terms of the lessons. And you can see, again, like that chessboard, you can see the little pieces down below and how this thing is made up. You get to see what was in the landscape. So what are other competitors doing and other teams doing? What's working well for them? Sorry, there's a really annoying fly. What are the things on the horizon that might be coming? So strategic thinkers will be thinking things like, oh, there's some political changes about to happen with the changes of government. What's the impact of the war? How has COVID impacted? It's that kind of big picture, generally external. So here, I've just talked about my slide. Big picture, big ideas, broad perspective. Sometimes called blue sky thinking. It's future focused. Generally, you'll be involved in organizational goals, departmental goals. What's our future mission? What do we want to achieve as a department? What do we want to achieve as an organization? what are our competitors doing? What's the market doing? How might politics or the economy or other external factors impact? And strategic thinking influences business direction. So it means that we can make some decisions based on this viewpoint from up here about where the organization might want to go, what we're prioritizing, what direction we're going in. And it means that, if I'm the CEO, for example, I have then got some priorities that I will pass down to my departmental heads and say, okay, these are the priorities for your operational departments. Or I might not do that. And I might say, here's where the business is going, and ask you to do the how will your department align to that business vision. Does that make sense? Okay. So pros and cons. And I've related this not to the organization, but to you as an individual. I think that's kind of why you're all here. So the pros of thinking strategically are for career growth and leadership potential. So I've told you, the higher up in an organization you go, if you have aspirations for that, you will have to learn to think like you're in a helicopter. It's a really attractive trait that when you strategically think, you have to constantly evolve, you have to learn, you have to navigate the things on the horizon as markets change, as external factors influence the way that your helicopter is kind of flying. You have to continuously learn and develop skills, and that's naturally an attractive trait in a candidate in leadership position. You can make some huge impact. Actually, you can kind of lead an organization to achieve some amazing things by having strategic awareness. You can then make the decisions that lead to that huge impact. And typically you'll get visibility and recognition. So if that's something that's important to you, again, I'm generalizing, but the higher up in an organization you go, the more you will be, I guess it can be a negative as well, but you will be known for making change, for having an impact. And that you might be brought in to do some change management that people don't like, but equally you might spearhead a campaign to, I'm just thinking about things like become net zero, to become, people have goals that, around sustainability or diversity. And it's that kind of recognition that as a leader in the field, you've had this impact. That can be a real pro of strategic thinking. And then the cons, I've put work-life balance, and this is one that's really important for where I'm at personally at the moment. But it's thinking, it's effort, it's a lot of potentially reading the news, reading industry magazines, having conversation, bringing ideas to life. You might have lots of meetings, and that stuff isn't necessarily always seen as useful. So think about if you've ever, perhaps you've passed judgment or you've received judgment that is like, what do you even do? Some people say, the higher up you go, you end up just being a people manager rather than doing the day to day. And that is true. It's a completely different way of thinking. The second one on the con is absolutely true of me. Detail neglect. So I can, again, it's not because you don't care, it's that you're just not necessarily focused, and you shouldn't be focused on the day-to-day detail. But that, you've got to be careful with that, because that can mean that you overlook some crucial operations. And actually, you'll see in the operational slide in a second, often what's happening on the ground can inform strategic direction. So things like, I'm trying to think of the right wording. It's let me try and think. If you think about a production line, that's a sort of typical operational example that people give. On a production line, you might find that there's an efficiency that could be gained if you did something different, or that actually you've got too many staff on one particular area and not on the other. That generally, if you're thinking strategically, you wouldn't be noticing that stuff. So you can overlook some things that actually might get you to meet your business direction and your business goals quicker if you did have that operational awareness. I hope that makes sense. It's a very uncertain place, and you have to be able and willing to lean into that. I think it's quite tough to be resilient to uncertainty. It can be quite a hard place to be in. And so when you think strategically, there are lots of challenges that come up, and lots of, like think about COVID. Nobody could have appreciated the impact that COVID would have. So strategic thinking is about navigating those kind of uncertain things because you've got a goal and a direction that you want to try and use as your North Star and keep steering towards. And then there can be resistance from operational teams. And I think that in terms of the day-to-day, so, not being understood and not being seen as valuable because you're doing the thinking and the conversation, but also resistance, if you've got business direction and you've got an understanding of where you want to go, you may have to ask operational teams to change the way they do things, and you might find some resistance in that. Has anybody got any questions on strategic thinking before we go into operational thinking? Yeah, absolute danger of burnout. Thank you, Yvonne, for sure. Again, I've been there. It's partially because I run my own business. I'm not sure if it's strategically, but it's really easy, or it's a lot easier when you work operationally to kind of go, okay, operations are done for the day. I can't change any processes at home. Doesn't mean you don't think about it, but I think when you think strategically, you're thinking big picture a lot, and absolutely danger of burnout. Feel free to add to that, Yvonne, if you want to add to that, or make it kind of personally relevant to you, or I'm more than happy for people to share their own examples, and kind of do this as a interactive thing. So any questions on strategic, or should we just keep going? Okay. So what is operational thinking? Again, photo production line. It's kind of somebody doing detail. It's very focused on, I'm obviously using very dramatic pictures, a helicopter in detail, but to try and illustrate the point. So operational thinking is very detail and process oriented. So you might not necessarily think, oh, I'm a details person, but your detail might be not minute, but it might be day to day. It might even be month to month, quarter to quarter. That's still operational. It's that sort of, you're going through a cycle or a process or a way of working, a procedure. Typically, there's a shorter term focus than strategic thinking. You will be focused on key performance indicators. That's what KPIs stand for, if anybody doesn't know. You'll be focused on kind of efficiency gains, production, productivity. How can we problem solve this better? How do we improve things? Very internal focused. So that might be internal as in the whole business. So it can still be huge, but it's about, how do we do things within this team? How do we do things within this department, within this organization, on this production line, for example? And actually, you will have to do lots of thinking around how you navigate those day-to-day problems. So staff shortages, for example, what happens if some equipment fails? What happens if a building burns? What happens if, sorry, I was working with a building safety department last week. What do you do if a contractor quits? What do you do if, and then equally, when a business decision is made strategically, what is the impact of that on your day-to-day operations? Most people I work with, most aspiring leaders do this day to day. Most people. It might be that, and I'm sure there'll be some of you here, it might be that you have a sort of head of department style role, whether that's your job title or not, where you have to kind of navigate the two. You almost act as a translator. So you might have a senior leadership team saying, here's where we want to go, here's kind of the business direction, here's the goals, here's what we want to achieve, how many customers we want to work with in the next year, for example. How are we going to go away and do it? And you have to create an operational plan and then do the day-to-day management. So sometimes you might have that translation style role. And then it also informs business decisions. So as a business owner, I'm very interested in how many people have we engaged as a result of doing that process? How many people have signed up to this webinar, and what does that mean? How many people decide that they want to have a chat with me after this, which might lead to future sales for our business? And where does that then determine how we market and where we aim the business to go in the future? You might have to do that translation piece, but absolutely operational informs those business decisions as well. I'm going to go to the next page, and then I'm interested to kind of know where you think you're at. So pros and cons of operational thinking. It's absolutely about enhancing efficiency and smooth workflow skills. So if you have operational thinking, first of all, you're someone that I want to employ. So I'm always looking for people who are good at the doing, good at the problem solving. You are someone who will have excellent problem solving ability. You might not have it yet, but you will if you work in operational roles, over time, because you have to learn to hone that. You will generally be pretty good at kind of being reactive and proactive and balancing the two. So you'll have the day-to-day doing, and then as things change, you will be able to tweak, and you will be able to probably quite naturally update a process. It might be frustrating, but you'll be able to do it. By having hands-on involvement in the day-to-day running of a business, it's actually excellent for team cohesion. It creates that supportive working environment and that trust and that rapport that I was talking about. You might hear people talk about or the people that sit up there, the strategic thinkers, the people that kind of aren't involved in the day-to-day. They haven't got a clue about what we do on the ground. It can sometimes feel quite divisive, but actually that kind of organizational culture is generally formed in the people that are doing the doing on the ground. And you'll get some real tangible results. And I think actually that creates great job satisfaction and accomplishment. You see the results of your labours much more clearly than at business direction level. There's some cons to it, as there was with strategic thinking. So it may hinder the bigger picture. You might be quite focused. I'm almost imagining kind of the blinkers on a horse. You might be so focused on the doing that actually things are changing at the top, and you don't want to update your processes to meet that need, or equally be struggling to find a way to, I don't know, thinking train people up to do things differently, which can hinder the business direction and that bigger picture. It can stagnate personal goals. And I put this here because if you have goals around moving upwards, but are unwilling or unable to flex out of this operational way of working, that can stagnate your personal goals. So if you keep going for a role and you're hearing things like, that's very operational focused, actually, we want you to think bigger picture, you'll be kind of relating to some of this, I suppose. There is a burnout risk here as well. I think there's just a burnout risk in life. But this burnout risk is slightly different. It's probably around firefighting a lot. So it might be that the work you take home is about, how do we fix this? How do we fix that problem? What am I going to do about the fact that our staff are leaving, or that this impact? And that's quite a different sort of energy, isn't it, to that kind of big thinking energy. And again, there may be missed opportunities for innovation. So that idea of, because this is the way we do things, it might be harder to innovate and make changes that actually could really impact the business. Okay, oops, I've done very good there with my bullet points. I'm going to put this up, and then okay, it's a versus thing. So on the left-hand side is strategic, and on the right-hand side is operational. And I've tried to put each bullet as the kind of flip side of both. I'm just going to leave that there for a second and open the chat box. So the first question that we're going to go to in a second is about which one do you think you are? But I'm just going to quickly catch up on here. Anecdote: I'm one of many women I know personally in their 50s that reached exec level in a job and have now opted for the last few years in operational. Yes, interesting. Due to inflexibility for part-time working in the workplace. Good book on Amazon called Revolting Women. I love that. Revolting Women. That's an excellent. What's the right word? I want to say pun. I don't know if that's the right word. I'll have a look at that. I love a book recommendation. And yeah, interestingly, it might be that you're at a stage in your career, and whether age is involved or not, where you go, do you know what? I don't want to move through the ranks. I'm perfectly happy in the role that I'm in now. I'll give you an example. My mother-in-law, she's an occupational therapist. She works with older people when they come out of hospital and kind of does that integration back into their own home. And she's excellent. She's done it for about 30 years and consistently gets asked to go up to management level, etc., etc. But she loves it. She wants to stay doing the doing. She wants to stay operational. She wants to stay having that impact on the ground. She knows her strengths. She knows her passion. Very willing to stay there. And I think you do see people exactly like you said there, Yvonne, kind of going, do you know what? Enough of that. And actually, I want to do the reason I'm doing this is because there's a generalization that the higher up you go in a leadership in an organization, the more strategic you have to think. That's why I'm very sort of dramatically doing this. not because one is better than the other, and we'll look at that now. Hayley said, would I be wrong in thinking, oh, hi, Hayley. Would I be wrong in thinking that leaders should encourage everyone on their team to think operationally, actively looking for opportunities to benefit the day-to-day operations in the business area? I think it depends on what your team is, who your team are. So yes, would be my short answer. But I think that there's also importance and gains to be had from stepping out of the operations every now and again. So it might be actually that you, I don't know, once a month, once a year even, you do an away day, or once a month you do an hour at the end of a team meeting where you go, okay, we're going to pause the day to day. Let's just check out big picture and check that we're still as functional as we could be, as effective as we could be, as efficient, etc. So I think it depends who your team are. If they are very operational, then yes. If you were a board, for example, then no. A tough one, isn't it? Hey, Lindsay. Feeling stuck in the operational, a desire to be more strategic, but the day-to-day operations can be so intense. Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some thumbs up there as well. It's my kind of the thing that comes out to the tip of my tongue is about sharing. It always comes down to communicating that you're interested in trying to think more strategically and that you want to become involved. And is there any way that you can own a project? You don't necessarily have to work your way up in an organization to even start. It could be about project ownership. So I'm wondering if there's any way that you can take on a project and sort of see it through from start to finish, but be the mastermind behind the project and not necessarily do all the doing as well. That could be a possible way of building some of those skills, I suppose. Yes, Anna, I'm so glad you've said that. Yeah, I completely missed this point. So Anna has put, some strategic leaders don't understand the issues on the ground, as don't understand the details. Yes, and that can be an absolute source of frustration. I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say it's because they shouldn't. I absolutely think strategic leaders should play to their strength and not understand. I don't need to understand the details of the way my business works. I need to understand the top level because it helps me to make decision and to move the business forward. But it's incredibly frustrating. And I think that's why I use the marriage as an example. It can be infuriating. You can often operationally find that strategic leaders will make decisions without having absolutely no concept. I hear it in the NHS all the time. So whenever I work with the NHS, there's that typical idea of the people on the ground absolutely care about their job. They're the people that are overworked and underpaid and doing the absolute, like, hands to the pump, is that a phrase, work on a day-to-day basis. Yet there's massive decisions being made about budget cuts, etc., that they just can't keep up with. And there's absolutely, I think, whenever I've worked with organizations on team dynamic stuff, one of the actions that often come out of it is, can we have the board, can we have the strategic leaders come and spend a day with us on the ground? But equally, the flex has to be the other way. I think there's pros and cons of both. But I'm really glad you said that, Anna, because it's really important. Vicky said, I've been asked to be more strategic for personal development and less transactional, but there isn't anyone to pick up the operational stuff. Oh, no. I mean, yeah, so you can't do it. Something has to give, doesn't it? That's really tough. I hope that you've been able to communicate that there isn't anyone to pick up the operational, and so it's hard. I don't have a fast solution for that without knowing more kind of context, but it can be really tough when you're expected to do both, for sure. Emma said she completely feels you. Andrea says, I'm the CEO of a small charity. I'm primarily strategic. However, given the size, I often need to get involved in the operational too. Yeah, Andrea, I'm exactly the same. And I think it's about skills development and personal awareness and self-awareness and personal development, isn't it? And that kind of continuing to grow and develop strengths and trying to just align. It might be, Andrea, that the next person that you bring in, you find out if they're more strategic and operational, just in terms of thinking, even if their role isn't that. Sometimes it can just help to have someone that bounces ideas off or sees things differently. I mentioned the mental health awareness training. We were both exactly the same job level, same job title. I just thought strategically and she thought operational, and it worked because we valued each other's input. We had to have the conversation of, I know you don't do it like this, and I know you don't do it like this. We had to have that conversation, but once we did, it was great. And I think you play to each other's strengths, don't you? You know, she was brilliant at having a structure, at having a right, we need to do this by that time, that time, by that time. But actually, when things inevitably don't go to plan in a training course, I was really within my comfort zone to be able to just flow and flex and, you know, eventually bring it back on track. My personality type feels out of control if I don't understand the operational detail, which feels overwhelming. Sounds like right there, you know what kind you are. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. I'll come back to the chat box again at the end. Okay, we're going to do some audit. So get your pen and paper or your notes app or whatever you're using. And I want you to just think about, excuse me, I want you to think about how you are outside of work. So I'll use my marriage as an example. Are you someone who gets frustrated by logistics? Are you someone who loves the ideas? Are you always saying, let's do this project, and then it never gets completed? Have a bit of a think. You can ask the person you live with if you want. Just have a think. Are you someone more operational or more strategic? You might call it different things. At home, we would say Hayley hates logistics. And then the next question is about work. So think about your job role. More strategic or more operational? And is there a disconnect? So do you do one at home and a different one at work? And is that disconnected? Maybe that disconnect very deliberate. There was an example there, wasn't there, about somebody who, sorry, I've forgotten your name without looking at the chat, who used to be at an exec level and now has absolutely made the decision to not be. So that disconnect might be deliberate, or you might be absolutely craving a role that better suits your personality. And then this bit's about the future. So do you need to upskill in either thinking type for your next job or career move? And think about, it might be that you're very, very operational, and actually your upskill might be about needing to have an awareness and an understanding of strategic so that you value it, or equally the other way around, you might be really strategic already. And actually, in order for your career or your, this is me, in order for me to run a successful business, I had to lean into understanding why operations was so essential and such a needed thinking style. So it could, you know, it can work either way. But do you need to upskill in either of these? And then let's move into your team. I've got a lovely WHG colleague here. Orbit previously. Do your team need to understand each other's preferences for thinking styles? So when I say that, think about any conflict or any kind of potential miscommunication. Is there anybody amongst your team? And if you don't have a team, think about your kind of your peers. Do you need to do any kind of understanding about, you know, what's going on with them and where that potential office politics might come from? Is there room for improvement? I would argue that there's always room for improvement. And interestingly now, I think my husband and I know each other enough in terms of the way we think like this to almost laugh. So he will sometimes just laugh and go, oh, forget it, I'm not even going to tell you, because I'm like, don't even care. I don't care what time we're leaving tomorrow to go to wherever we're going. Just tell me 10 minutes before I'm going. And that would infuriate him. But we now just laugh about that. Equally, there are occasions where I have to get over myself because it is infuriating for him. And it's really important, actually, that the kids have got everything they need to go on their school trip. And it's my responsibility to get that done, for example, that day. So is there room for improvement? What or who do you need to facilitate better communication? And I put who in there because obviously that's what I do, but it might be, you know, I literally go into teams and communicate and help them to communicate rather. But it might be that you already have something existing. You might already have a functionality at work, or you might say to that, yeah, we need a team meeting. So that's a what do you need to better facilitate communication? Drink my squash like a child. I'm pro kids drink. And then, does anyone need upskilling, and how will you do this? And by that I mean it's not about you, but in your team. Is there anybody else in your team that needs to understand the difference between operational and strategic thinking? And by all means, give them the replay of this. It's absolutely fine. Okay. Before I sort of do the close part of this, I just want to end with this slide. All leaders do this. They reflect, they learn, and they take action, and they do it all of the time. So traditionally, my series of webinars and the work that I do is around leadership development. I've already mentioned what Compassionate Leaders does as an organisation. But within the Women in Social Housing Network, Gemma is about personal, individual development, and I'm about leadership and management and team development. And so I always share this slide. So whenever you go through any process, you need to reflect. Use those reflection audit questions. Have some conversations with team members. If you're an external processor, book in for a virtual coffee with me. It's completely free. I'm someone who, I'm a people person. I like conversations. It helps me get to know my market needs more. So I'm always up for a virtual coffee if you want to reflect out loud. But it's whenever you're facing a challenge or a problem or something you want to get better at, or a personal development goal, reflect. First of all, you have to know where you're starting. You then need to learn. So you need to learn how to overcome that, or how to fix it, or how to problem solve it. I really recommend a book by Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He talks about trust and rapport being the absolute foundation, and that there are other stages as well, which we don't have time to go into today. In fact, I've got a webinar coming up. Oh, this is a shameless plug. In a couple of months, actually, called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So if you're interested in that, have a look at the Wish website. It's on there. Again, it's totally free. Learn more about growth mindset and that kind of self-awareness, and how important it is to continuously learn rather than getting stagnated and stuck in a way of thinking. And then look at what you can do to learn about confidence building. If your confidence in moving up strategically is because you'd have to delegate, or you would have to potentially have, I don't know, some difficult conversations, or it's a career progression confidence, absolutely learn. You've got to do something about it. There's no good reflecting and having the self-awareness that something needs to change if you don't then do something with that. Don't do this webinar and go, thanks very much for that hour, see you later, and never do anything. Like, what's the point? So you've got to do some learning. And then the action piece there is about, okay, so you've reflected and you've done some learning. Now let's make some changes. Let's implement something. I've put some examples there of the ways you can work with me, but your action might be internally within your own organisation. It might be that your action is to have a conversation with a member of staff about their training needs. It might be that you have a conversation with your boss around taking on a strategic project. Just do something to forward the learning that you've had in this webinar today. And if it's okay with you, I'm just going to take the last couple of minutes. We'll do Q&A as well for anybody that has a question and wants to sort of stay on. But I'm just going to talk to you about 2 things that I've got coming up that might interest you. There's a QR code there that, I love this photo. I think we've got Wolverhampton Homes, WHG, Orbit, BM3. Who else is here? There's a few other organisations there as well. That was from a recent workshop that I delivered. That QR code will take you to my LinkedIn. It will take you to my website, but there's also 2 services coming up through Wish that you might be interested in. The first I want to just tell you about is the Leadership Development Programme. So if you are watching this today and thinking, I want to grow more as a leader, I want to move into that level of management, I want to really kind of develop myself professionally and personally, this one might be for you. So if you're interested in personal career development, scan that QR code, and there's a thing that says register your interest, I think it is. So in October 2024, so this year, I'm going to be delivering, in fact, let's just put all this on. I'm going to be delivering a 6-month training program that is completely accredited with the Institute of Leadership Management. It's going to be a hybrid, so we're going to do in-person training days, because you get the best. I mean, you can see from the smiles on these faces, the best days happen in person, but we're going to do online coaching to kind of complement that. It will be a 6-month process. We haven't finalised dates, details, price, or anything yet, but if anybody does just want to register their interest for finding out more, if you scan that QR code with your phone. If anybody has never done that before, if you open up the camera app on your phone, hover over that QR code, and a link should come up. If you click it, you'll be able to find the form for you to register your interest. That's kind of the first thing I wanted to tell you that's coming up with Wish. And the other thing is a team dynamics workshop. So let's just open all of that. If you are interested in having me come into your organization to connect and align your team, it might be around strategic operational thinking. It might be around something completely different. Maybe it's you've gone through loads of change, you've got loads of new members of staff. It might be that you've got some office politics, some kind of conflict going on. There's a bit of information there about how that works. If you scan the QR code and book in for a virtual cuppa, I'll have a chat to you and get to know a little bit more about what are some of the current challenges that you've got going on and how best to approach that. I only work with 20 a year and I've only got 7 spots left for 2024. So that's 7 teams, not 7 organizations. And in terms of the process, the way that works is we always do a questionnaire in advance that's completely anonymous. And that allows me to get a feel for all the stuff that people aren't willing to say out loud in a room. So you get to unearth some of the kind of, I guess, the underlying, I don't know, the stuff that can get a little bit rotten inside of a team. We get to pull all that out. And we'll have a workshop that is very much about building trust and team dynamics, but it's about looking at how you can work together more effectively. So we look at what's the purpose of the team? How do you all align under certain behaviours and certain ways of working? Where do you want to go in the next 5 years, for example? And what are some of the things that need ironing out in terms of the way you communicate in order to get there? I always hold people to account, and there's always some actions that come out after the workshop as well. But if that's something that interests you, just click that QR code and we can go for it. And on that note, Q&A. I'm going to just close my screen so I can see everybody. We're about time. Yeah, we're 4 minutes over. Apologies. So if anybody does need to go, that's kind of the official end. But I will stay on for as long as there are questions or as long as anybody wants to stay and talk to me. If you don't want to book a virtual cuppa, I don't have another client until 2:30. So I will stay on this call as well if anybody does want to ask me anything. So let me stop sharing. And I hope that was useful. I hope it was, I know we have to kind of fly through. Hang on a minute. Why is it asking me to change my language? Okay, all right. I'm going to just open the chat, and then if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you can. If you want to, if you want to come on camera, go for it. Okay. Be right back. Someone at the door. I once received feedback. So Nicholas said, I once received feedback from an interview that my answers weren't strategic enough. Can you develop this skill? And if so, how? Or should I stay in my lane? That's a great, really good question. You can absolutely develop the skill if you want to. And I think that's the key. So let's go to your second question first around should you stay in your lane? I think it's about recognizing, do you have a natural ability for one or the other? So we do our best work when we are in flow. And what that means is that you are challenged enough, but within the skill set that you have. So actually, if that means I'm really happy in my lane, go for it. If you absolutely have career progression goals and you want to become more strategic, you absolutely can develop the skill. If we had longer than an hour, and we do on my leadership development programs, we would be able to go into this. But yes, you can develop the skill. And I would say it is always imagine you're in a helicopter. So just have that analogy in your head all the time. So in any situation that you go into at work, try and helicopter out and look at what else is going on. So I suppose the questions are around what we're doing as a team or what I'm doing as an individual. What impact does that have on the bigger picture? And equally, what does the bigger picture, how does that impact what we're doing as an individual team? And so I think you develop the skill by just asking yourself all the time to practice that. It's just a practice thing. It might be that you never naturally do that, and that's okay. I still think you can work at a strategic level, but have excellent people in your team that think in terms of big picture. So it might be you work at a strategic level, but are really operationally naturally, but you can lean into the strategic, creative, innovative members of your team. Equally, it can work the other way around. Like I absolutely, like my husband is the best person in my whole entire life. I'm not going to tell him I've said all this, by the way, because he helps me I get frustrated by my own big picture. He actually makes things happen for me, Get a few people nod. So hopefully that answered that, Nicola. I think it's just about practice, like a lot of things, unfortunately. Struggle to know the answer to number 8. The communication can be pretty poor among home working team members. Yeah, this is huge. Lots and lots of team dynamics workshops that I run at the moment are about getting people back in the room with each other. And I'm not saying you have to stay working back in the room with each other, because obviously hybrid working has been a fantastic opportunity. But I think it's about realigning people and saying, okay, now that we work online and we work from home, what does this need to look like? And I think you need to do it in the room where you can see body language and you can see interaction, and people get to say the things that perhaps they can't say, in this little tiny box. Yourself, you don't. I very deliberately do it in front of certain things that give you a bit of a feeling for who I am, but you get that snapshot, and you just, how can you effectively communicate and build that trust and rapport? But we have to acknowledge that that is the way that the world is going, and so have to have conversations around how do we best do this. You're welcome, Lisa. Yeah, I will send a copy of the slides. I'll send a recording. You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? No problem, everybody. Thank you for engaging. Thank you, thank you. Yes, connect on LinkedIn, that would be good.
Would you share the codes again, please, Hayley?
Yeah, of course I can. Absolutely. Rebecca said I missed the team dynamics. Do you mean the QR code?
No, that was me, Hayley. So there was something around, I went through the QR code. It was around the team dynamics workshop. I couldn't see from the link through the QR code how you found out.
Do this. Book a virtual cuppa.
All right, book a virtual cuppa. Excellent.
Yeah. So basically, it's because I this is going to sound, I don't mean this to sound really ridiculous now, but because I only work with a certain number of people a year, just physically can't fit anymore in my diary. It's really important that I understand what the dynamics of your team is and what your current challenges and problems are. So basically, what I do in a cuppa is just have a bit of a chat. What's going on for you? What kind of what are the dynamics like? Do you work from home? Do you work in an office? How does your team fit within the wider organization? What do you know where you want to go in 5 years? What might your team look like with any changes? I have that kind of conversation with you, basically.
Okay, right, that's great. Yeah, no, I could see I could see the virtual cuppa. That's great, thank you.
Yeah, virtual cuppa, or just stay on the end as well if you prefer that. Thank you. You're welcome. Great presentation, thank you. Do you do team dynamics workshops for any business types? Yeah, absolutely. Friends in different industries have been very interested following my experiences. Yes, so 80% of the work I do is with housing associations, because that's my background and that's where my network is. But the other 20% is with anybody, and it really doesn't matter. So actually, it's about, if I sort of tell you what happens in a team dynamics workshop, we do the questionnaire beforehand to find out kind of what's the undercurrent is, and then we look at building trust and rapport. So the first bit is about, it's the traditional team building, but obviously it isn't about, don't just take your team flipping skydiving for the day. Who would do that? That's too expensive. Don't take your team abseiling for the day or cocktail making. It's great, but it doesn't fix, and it doesn't do anything. Like it's great socially, but it doesn't actually have a lasting impact. It's the conversation underneath that. So by all means do cocktail making, but then have a conversation about what is it that we've learned about each other? How can we translate that back to the workplace? And so we do a bit in the morning around who are we as individuals, what drives us, what has shaped us in our life and our thinking, what might we not know about each other that is a bit fun and exciting that we might want to, we kind of, it's light, but it's also emotive. And then we'll move into the core foundations of a team. So I always say that there are 5 core foundations to a team. There's the leader's self-awareness. There is the leader's understanding of who they are and how they interact and how they experience the world and how that is communicated to other people. There's the team dynamics, the individual personalities, the interplay between those people. There is foundations. So that is about, do you all have an understanding of what the purpose of this team is? I know that sounds really basic, but do you have an understanding about how your job impacts that person's job? Do you have an understanding of the things that are expected from you by the outside of the team? Do you have that absolute foundation in place, and do people understand their role within that? You'd be amazed how many people don't have that. We then look at your aspirations. So does everybody in the team understand where this team is heading? is that strategic direction translated down to the individual? And that's really important, because the way that the human brain works is to connect why I'm doing what I'm doing with the meaning in my life. And so I guess what I mean by that is, this day-to-day task might seem absolutely pointless, but if I have an understanding about how the thread weaves itself all the way up to the direction of the company, I get it. I'm more likely to take feedback on that. I'm more likely to kind of feel engaged. So we look at the leader, the team, foundations, aspirations, and then operations. So that's that real problem solving, the ways of working, the behaviors you expect, the interactions that happen amongst your team, what isn't acceptable. And we very much set that as a team. It's not about me coming in and training. It's very, very facilitator focused. I have no idea how to run your business and no idea how to run your team. What I am really good at is asking the right questions. I am able to pick up if there's an undercurrent. I am able to facilitate discussion that perhaps would never have happened outside of this. So the reason I sort of share that structure is because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, or how big your team is, or whether you're a team leader with operational staff, or whether you are at board and you're all at senior management level. It doesn't really matter. The conversations are the same. I hope that makes sense. Just check for any other questions. Feel like I don't get to progress because it suits the business to keep me in an operational role. Lisa, we've got some work to do there. And I would say, I'm not sure, Lisa, are you still on? Yeah. There's a technique that I would use in a one-to-one coaching session, and there's 4 options. So when you're feeling like you're stuck, or you've got a challenge and you're kind of struggling, that potentially it's outside your control. So yeah, it's suiting the business to keep you there. You get 4 options. And I'm going to share what those 4 options are, and you get to choose. You don't have to do this live on the call with me unless you want to. Some of these will feel like, oh no, I'd never try that. No, that's not for me. Others of them you might feel a little bit more aligned to. So let me just tell you what they are. So you can change yourself, you can change the situation, you can put up and shut up, or you can piss off. Excuse my language. So let me go into a little bit more detail. Changing yourself is your mindset, the way you're dealing with this, the way you're thinking about it. You get to proactively say, do you know what? I'm not going to let it bother me anymore. Or you get to say, do you know what? It is what it is. You can do that. You might say, no, I've already done that. That's not for me, but that's okay. That's an option. Change the situation is kind of a bit more practical. It might be having a meeting with your manager. It might be putting an organizational restructure in. It depends what your role is. It might be that you need to have a team meeting. It might be that you need to go on some training. That's changing the situation. And any other things you can think of. Put up and shut up. It kind of does what it says on the tin. It's do nothing. But the deal is, and I say this with love, you have to stop moaning about it. I know you're not, you know what I mean? So it's, you make the decision to feel in control. Do you know what? I'm going to do nothing, but it's worth the pay at the end of the month, and I'm going to live my life for something outside of work. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of attitude. Or piss off is piss off, go get another job.
Yeah, those 4 options I have definitely thought about.
Okay.
And I think I'm quite an impatient person, so I've been like, right, be patient and put plans in place, present what the way you think strategically this should go. Okay. And if you get nothing back, then possibly go for option 4. You know, so it's like, so yeah, I suppose I'm just trying to learn patience at the moment, and maybe just make sure that I feel I'm developed enough to move role. But I just feel as if I'm constantly brought back to the stuff I'm good at, and I never get any further.
It's really tough. I can hear your frustration. There's 2 things going on in my head, and the first one is when you sort of present that to them, think about what they want to hear rather than what you want. And I know that's really tough, but they'll make a decision based on, will it help them gain efficiency? Will it save them money? That's how they're going to make a decision. And I hate that, because you're a human being behind all of this. But that was the other half of my thinking, was maybe it does suit them to keep you in an operational role because they need an operational member of staff. And that, therefore, your option is number 4. But it's about, how do you exit the organization with an excellent track record, some learning, some understanding towards your next thing. And actually, if they feel like they need somebody to stay in an operational role and that isn't you because you've outgrown it, I would hope, I don't know what organisation you work for, but I would hope that they would help you to exit successfully.
Yeah, I think they would. Yeah, it's the whole thing of like trying to get the team, like I'm trying to really develop them to step up as I'm trying to, you know, work on what are their strengths, and it can be hard when everyone works from home, you know, to try and get that communication, and so I'm thinking, you know, develop the team more, and then that allows me to move away from that operational.
Do you want to, if you book in for a virtual cuppa with me, I'm really happy to just hash it out a bit.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, it's fine. I do it all the time. It's really tough to, if we delivered this in a workshop in a room, we'd be able to have this conversation for as long as you want. So let's absolutely have that chat. I'm happy to just give some ideas, or, you know, share how I've seen it done before, for example. All right. Fab. Right, let me just check any others. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, we are officially at the end. I will stay here until the last person has left in case anybody wants to talk. But just to sort of end with, thank you so much for being here, for using the chat, for interacting. I look forward to hopefully seeing you on another webinar soon. There are lots more coming up. Got a couple every month.